Hello, welcome to another episode of News from the Blind Side, except that this isn't really News from the Blind Side today. This is kind of just me talking because I have a microphone here. You probably saw it in my last video, or actually you probably didn't because not very many people watched that video, which I totally understand. But the audio from this is brought to you by the Samsung Q9U, and the reason why I highlight this is because I lost the instruction manual for this a long time ago. I've had it for several years. I had a podcast that I ran out of a separate house, and then I stopped doing anything with that, and I can't figure out how the heck this works. So if this audio sounds horrible, it is probably not brought to you by Samsung, but it should have been. I have a little button here. I can't figure it out if it's in or out. This is one of the things that drives me crazy about electronics, is when there's no indicator that tells you, or anything that says on or off. I have these little switches on the back. I don't know if you can see them, but they're there, and I can't actually tell what they're useful for. It's been years. I've kind of forgotten about it. I set it up once and forgot about it, and now I'm recording on a phone instead of a desktop using Audacity, so I'm not really sure if this is even working, or if you're just picking up the crappy phone audio. And if you're picking up the crappy phone audio, then just deal with it. Yeah, today's news actually comes from is brought to you by Google, and because this is just something that I found on my phone, and I'm going to show you. I think I captured it. If you swipe a certain way, then it brings you to a news feed. Actually, two news feeds. One's from Google, one's from T-Mobile, because I use T-Mobile. T-Mobile's all about sports, and I'm not really into sports. But what I am into is things like archaeology, history, science, things like that. And so that's what Google shows me, because that's what the algorithm does. It goes, oh, this person clicks on this stuff. And one of the big interests I have is in archaeology, is in history, is in just kind of the narratives that we tell about ourselves. It's one of the reasons why I'm fascinated by news and what we cover and how, because news is the stories that we choose to tell about today. It's like an immediate, like, what we think is important that other people know. And this is not really something that is important for other people to know, but the story of it is. The story of the story is. I have some screenshots from my phone. I'm going to pop them up here. I'm not recording on my phone. This is somebody else's phone, because my phone, I can't get to stop recording in black and white for some reason. Actually, it shows as color on my phone, but it always displays as black and white, or copies as black and white to anything else, regardless of what settings I use. So I'm borrowing somebody else's phone to record these. And but this screenshot is from my phone, and it shows the story. And one of the things about me is I'm kind of old, as you can probably tell. I have some gray in my beard, and my hairline's receding and stuff. But as kind of an old person, I'm used to there being references and names as to what might be a real source, and or at least a legitimate source, and what is not. If you live east of the Mississippi, all of your publicly licensed broadcast stations, whether they're radio or whether they're TV, they're going to start with the letter W. Everything west of the Mississippi is going to be starting with K. Hence, you have the TV show WKRP in Cincinnati, because Cincinnati is east of east of there. One of the big confusions that I had, because I was driving over the road when Wish.com became a thing, so there's a TV station in Indianapolis called Wish, W-I-S-H is the call letters. So all of a sudden people were talking about Wish.com, and I'm like, well, they've kind of gone pretty far from their, from their news background. Of course, their URL is wishtv.com, I believe. I haven't been there in years and years, but it took me a little while to be like, oh, wish.com is a shopping thing, not a news source. So this website, the name of it is WION, which to me says that this probably has some legitimacy to it and is worth reading. And it's not. They got me by me being old and assuming that WION meant that it was a terrestrial broadcaster and thus held to some kind of standards. And it's not. It's a news website, and you'll see right now I'm popping a picture of a pyramid. And you'll notice that this pyramid is in pretty rough shape. This is the pyramid at Hawara in Egypt. It is an Egyptian pyramid. It does not look like what you're used to, which is this, because they are the Great Pyramids, and the reason why they're the Great Pyramids is because they're big and because they're still there. The Great Pyramids were built in a certain way. Everybody knows, well, most people know, they're made of solid blocks, like all the way through except for the chambers and the passageways. Everything else is giant stones, with a few gaps left to lessen the load. But most pyramids were not built this way. Most pyramids were built kind of hollow, as in you put the big blocks on to create the chambers and the passageways, and then you just put like mud brick all the way around them, and then finish that up with limestone facing, which, by the way, the Great Pyramids also had limestone facing. The difference is that the Great Pyramids had those solid stone blocks underneath it, and this had mud bricks underneath it. Because mud bricks are a lot cheaper to make. I mean, the stuff is right there. No need for all the transporting and the chiseling and all that stuff. And so this is what a lot of the pyramids in Egypt look like. Hawara is actually fairly, in my view, kind of typical. I'm pretty sure that we don't know all the pyramids out there because they probably just disappeared because they just eroded away or were mined away. Yeah, so this is now the story says this is an unusual pyramid. It's not built like typical Egyptian pyramids, and I mean, there really was no standard way of doing it. Some of them, I think, were just filled in with like construction debris. Others were mud brick. Standards fell over time, and there's various reasons for that. But the meat of this story is that there's a big void underneath this pyramid. Now, pyramids don't just appear by themselves, right? They also have a funerary complex around them. The point of pyramids is that the pharaoh is a god, and part of his essence, part of his soul in ancient Egyptian theology was kind of convoluted, kind of complex. They had multiple parts of the soul that did different things, and different things happened to each thing after death. And one of them was that part of it could remain with the body, and that was definitely held to have happened with the pharaohs and other important people. Hence the mummification, because it's important for that part of the soul to have a body to remain with. And but the pyramid itself was a tomb. Everything around it had to do with the worship of the pharaoh, and you'd have a funerary complex around it that had the shrines and the places where they prepared the body and all these things. I don't know exactly what all happened there. and what it all specifically, what each kind of part of it meant, but as a totality, it was all involved in the worship of the pharaoh as a god, as the god actually. And so there was this big structure above ground, and under this pyramid is a void. Don't know exactly what that void is, but this story says that they link it to a story told by Herodotus. And Herodotus is known as the father of history, as they point out in this. And Herodotus was called the father of history because essentially he's the first Greek that we have anything from directly relating to historical writings. Like, he did do a history of the conflicts, of the wars between Persia and Greece, and it was held to be a pretty good history. Now, we know that there were at least 6 other people before him who wrote similar, who wrote about historical things like that, but we only know their names. We don't actually know what they wrote. They were just kind of, we know that they came before Herodotus. So Herodotus wasn't the first. He was just the first one whose writings survived. And when you're called the father of history, the father of anything, it's kind of expected that there was a standard that you held yourself to. This was not really the case with Herodotus. He would basically just take what people told him, and write it down, and didn't really have any critical thinking of himself, of his own, which is what today historians, they're expected to think critically. They're expected to question sources. They're expected to see what else people are saying, or what other people wrote, or just get other perspectives, and be able to synthesize information and say something that people find reliable, interesting, whatever. Herodotus didn't do any of that. He was far more of what, I don't know, my academic background is in applied anthropology, and so I would put him more in the realm of kind of more folklorist than anything else, except more just like somebody who wrote down folklore and didn't actually think about it too much, because he would just take what people told him and write it down and present it as a fact. And that's why he got his other nickname, the father of lies, because a lot of stuff that people read that he wrote and that they believed were pretty wild. In this case, he in the instance of this pyramid, he wrote that there is this big complex above ground, and then he saw that there's another complex below ground that was blocked off by these giant blocks that you could see, and that was something that he found fascinating. And he said that according to his calculations, or rough estimate, or just general gut feeling, that meant that there had to be at least 3,000 rooms below ground. And then he invoked the labyrinth of the Minotaur and said, and suggested that this is where that actually was. And this is like wrong on a couple of levels, because first of all, I have never heard an Egyptian version of the labyrinth with a Minotaur in it. That's something that is pretty much just comes from Greece, and this was before Greece conquered that area. This was before the time of Alexander the Great. So this was still an independent place with Egyptian rulers, Egyptian traditions, Egyptian everything, and Egypt was very, very full of itself, and they had a right to be because they had persisted while all these other great civilizations had collapsed, and so they were entitled to that, but they were not going to go and adopt Greek stories like the Labyrinth and the Minotaur. So this was something that he came up with himself. And the thing about this story that Google fed me was it relied entirely on Herodotus' interpretation of this site as, having this giant underground complex of over 3,000 rooms that he proclaimed to be the origin of the story of the labyrinth with the Minotaur. And this is much more the father of lies versus the father of history. Now, the thing about it is that a lot of times when he presented somebody's story that was clearly like crazy, he would add after it, or so they say, or just a negatory thing that translates into or not. And oddly enough, in this article, which I hate in so many ways because it is just complete garbage history, right? It says that scientists, that researchers in a paper in 2012, which is not at all quoted. It's not. They don't talk about the paper at all, except to mention the existence of a paper. It said that researchers are concluding that this void is this labyrinth, and then it says, or not. And man, that irks me so much, because on a certain level, something tells me that this is written by AI, possibly, or at least with the assistance of AI, just because of how it's constructed. And I don't know why I say that, because I'm not an expert in deconstructing AI writings at all. It's just something that is just like somebody told AI to write a story about a pyramid and something, and this is largely what came out, maybe with some editing. And the thing about it is that this story comes from Herodotus, right, about the labyrinth and all this stuff, and just to add in that or not is very much like Herodotus. And then that brings me back to the fact this is served up by a Google algorithm to me, because it knows that I like this kind of story. I mean, I like a good historical narrative, even if it isn't factually true. If it's well constructed, well written, the things within it are internally consistent. This really does not fall into that at all, but that or not just makes me wonder, is an AI writing a Herodotus story here and presenting it for us? Is this like a wink from whoever composed it, whether it was human or AI? Was this just like a wink to those of us who are paying attention that this whole thing is garbage? And I want to believe so, but on the other hand, that doesn't make this right. That does not rescue this from the story is crap category, because you have to have pretty specialist knowledge. You have to be familiar at least with Herodotus's writing and how he presented things, and know that that's something that he would add in as a wink that maybe he's not, that maybe this isn't actually true. And to present that to the mass to a mass audience like that is just horrible. I mean, you write it knowing that it's garbage, knowing that it's a lie, knowing that it may be parody, it may be satire. I haven't actually investigated the site that much because I didn't really want to give them the clicks, because Google is feeding people to this site. And maybe they're paying Google for the clicks. I don't know. One of the reasons why I haven't covered this, why I waited so long to do this, because I found this like 3 or 4 weeks ago, is I didn't want it to be publicized that much, because honestly, it's horrible information. It's garbage information. It's for a broad audience. Even if the intent is parody or something, which I doubt it is, I think it's more just in line of lazy conspiracy writing stuff, which is how I'm taking it, with maybe a wink to the knowing that it's one of those if you know you know kinds of things, which is garbage, because you're still going to be leading people astray. You're still going to be filling their heads with garbage. And there's too much garbage on the internet already. We don't need this. I mean, it's one thing if it's a known parody site. Maybe they're trying to make themselves into a known parody site. I don't know. But the fact that Google is serving this up to me by its algorithm, that's the dangerous part. And that brings me to my kind of grand conclusion on all this, which is that I think we have a new father of history / father of lies, and that is Google, because Google doesn't care. It just gives us stories that we think are interesting, or that it thinks that we think are interesting, and has no actual critical thinking applied to it. And this could be a paid thing. I don't know. It could be a paid placement. But the fact that they would do this with a paid placement, regardless of its factuality, is still in that category of, father of lies. And I think it's, and the thing that this points to is that we complain about Google and the algorithm. But Google and the algorithm exists in different places and different versions, of course, like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all this. They're all different algorithms, but they're all doing the same thing. And this is something that people in Herodotus' time were complaining about Herodotus' writing as being misleading, being disingenuous, being conspiracy-minded, and not conspiracy-minded in the way that maybe we think of it today, but just in terms of, spreading kind of irrational thinking and irrational magical thoughts, which is kind of crazy considering that this is a culture that, believe that, in large part, that, reincarnation exists, or maybe it doesn't, but certainly, the gods exist and are wandering the world and do horrible things from time to time when they get upset. This is all, they have plenty of magical thinking themselves, and when they go and look at Herodotus' writings and they go, oh, this is garbage, that's, he really crossed lines, and they complained about it then, and people since then have complained about him and how he presented information uncritically. And isn't that exactly what the algorithm does for us today? And we complain it, but it's something that is not new. And you could say, oh, but the algorithm is all around us today. Well, there weren't a lot of writers back then, Plato, I believe it was Plato, who called literacy the death of memory, and fought against the notion that a lot of people should be able to read and write, because he felt that meant that you externalize your memory, right? You externalize your memory, and it makes it harder. You don't learn the skills the retention of memory. And if somebody presents you with something that you haven't memorized, but you're familiar with, but they change a few words, they can change the entire meaning of it. And he felt that literacy was actually something that would allow the public to be manipulated, made them more susceptible to propaganda, made them more susceptible to conspiracy, into uncritical thinking. And I'm pretty sure that part of that, and I'm not quite sure if Herodotus, or I didn't look this up, I'm just talking off the top of my head now. I'm not sure if Herodotus came before or after Plato, but if he came before, I'm sure that Plato would have pointed out to Herodotus as a reason to limit literacy, because otherwise your head could be filled up with things like that, because there weren't a lot of writers, right? There weren't a lot of famous writers. There weren't a lot of, I mean, you had your philosophers and stuff, but they were fairly few and far between. Most people did not have that kind of luxury to just sit and write, or travel and write like Herodotus did. He was an elite, and because of that, he got listened to. His stuff got read. His stuff got read because there wasn't a lot of other stuff to read and to be familiar with compared to what we have today. So, you know, it's kind of interesting to me that we still kind of have this conundrum today. We still haven't figured out a way to fight this. We still haven't figured out a way to kind of exclude these conspiracy or fantastic minded writers from kind of contaminating the knowledge sphere. And I think it's important to talk about these things, because it's not really about the specific, oh, no, I don't believe that that the labyrinth is underneath this specific pyramid, or any pyramid for that matter. But the fact of how that story spreads and how that story is circulated to people like me, and people like, I'm sure lots of other people saw it and clicked on it as well. And some of them, a lot of them probably were like, oh, that's interesting, and just moved on. And they may think that, oh, there's a labyrinth underneath this pyramid. And it's not a big deal that people think that there's a labyrinth underneath this pyramid. It doesn't affect us at all. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, who cares, right? But it's more that these kinds of stories keep circulating, and after all this time, after thousands of years, we still don't have a good way of filtering this stuff out of separating out this kind of stuff from the stuff that is actually real and is actually important. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Anyway, that's all I have for you today, and I hope you have a great day. Continue being awesome. If you like this, like, subscribe, whatever, and if you think I'm full of crap, leave a comment. If you think I could do things better, leave a comment. Tell me. Give me feedback. I want that feedback. I want that interaction, darn it. I want that algorithm to work on my behalf. You have a great day. Thanks for watching.